You wake up on a normal morning and check your balance, and nothing seems dramatically different from yesterday. Yet somewhere, quietly in the background, a small shift has occurred that most people never notice. Because money has started behaving in a way that no longer depends entirely on your effort. And this is the point where the conversation stops being about income and starts becoming about time. Because compound wealth is not built on intensity, but on duration. And the uncomfortable reality is that most people spend years focusing on how to earn more, while almost completely overlooking how money actually grows once it is no longer being touched. The idea of compounding often sounds simple on the surface, almost too simple to take seriously. Yet that simplicity hides a structural advantage that only reveals itself over longer periods. Because compounding is not linear growth, where effort and outcome scale together. Instead, it is exponential, which means the early stages feel slow, almost disappointing, while the later stages appear disproportionately powerful. And this imbalance is exactly why it is misunderstood, because the human brain is naturally wired to expect immediate feedback, not delayed acceleration. To understand what is really happening, it helps to move away from vague ideas about growth and look directly at the mechanics. Because compound wealth follows a very specific structure where returns generate additional returns, and those returns continue to build on themselves over time, creating a feedback loop that gradually shifts the source of growth away from new contributions and toward accumulated capital, which means the longer the system runs, the less dependent it becomes on external input. This equation represents the core engine behind compound growth, where the initial amount is multiplied repeatedly over time rather than simply added to. And while the formula itself is straightforward, its implications are less intuitive, because small differences in time create disproportionately large differences in outcomes. And this is where most people underestimate the system, not because they do not understand the formula, but because they do not emotionally register what exponential scaling actually feels like over long periods. Imagine two individuals who behave almost identically in terms of discipline, consistency, and income, except for one difference that seems insignificant at first, where one begins allocating capital earlier, while the other delays, and over short periods, the difference appears minimal, almost negligible. Yet as time extends, the gap widens, not gradually, but structurally. Because the earlier capital has more time to compound, and time inside the system becomes more valuable than the size of contributions outside it. This is where financial psychology begins to interfere, because delayed rewards create a perception that the system is not working, especially in the early phase where growth appears slow and uneventful. And this often leads to interruption, withdrawal, or inconsistency, all of which reset the compounding process and prevent it from reaching the stage where acceleration becomes visible. And as a result, many people never actually experience compound growth in its full form, even if they conceptually understand it. There is also a deeper systemic layer to consider, because modern economic structures are not neutral environments for compounding, and access to compounding is often unevenly distributed, not in terms of knowledge, but in terms of stability, time horizon, and available surplus capital, which means individuals under financial pressure are more likely to interrupt the process, while those with stability can allow it to continue uninterrupted, creating a widening gap that is not solely based on intelligence or effort, but on the ability to remain in the system long enough. This introduces a subtle but important shift in perspective, where wealth is no longer viewed purely as accumulation, but as system participation. Because the key variable is not just how much you earn or invest, but how long your capital remains active without disruption. And this reframes financial behavior away from short-term optimization and toward long-term continuity, where consistency becomes more valuable than intensity. Another overlooked aspect is that compounding does not only apply to capital, but also to behavior, because financial decisions tend to reinforce themselves over time, where disciplined habits create stable systems that allow compounding to continue, while reactive or inconsistent behavior introduces friction that slows or resets the process. And over long periods, these behavioral patterns become just as important as the numerical variables in the equation. When viewed from a broader perspective, compound wealth begins to resemble a time-based filter rather than a purely financial mechanism, because it rewards those who can tolerate delayed results, maintain consistency, and avoid unnecessary interruptions, while quietly penalizing those who prioritize immediacy, react to short-term fluctuations, or exit the system too early. And this is why the gap created by compounding often appears invisible in the beginning but becomes undeniable later. As time progresses, something subtle but significant begins to happen, where the contribution of new input becomes less dominant compared to the growth generated by existing capital. And this is the point where the system starts to feel different, because effort is no longer the primary driver of change, and instead, the structure itself begins producing outcomes, which creates a shift in how decisions are made, how risk is evaluated, and how time is perceived. What makes this dynamic particularly difficult to internalize is that it does not produce consistent, visible feedback, because long periods of slow accumulation are followed by relatively shorter periods of noticeable acceleration, and without a long enough time horizon, the system appears ineffective, which is why many people abandon it before reaching the stage where it begins to justify their patience. In the end, the math behind compound wealth is not complicated, but the experience of living through it is, because it requires operating within a system where results are delayed, progress is uneven, and the most important variable, time, cannot be accelerated or substituted, and this creates a quiet divide between those who remain in the system long enough to see its effects and those who exit before the structure has a chance to fully unfold. The shift then is not just financial but psychological, where money stops being something that is constantly managed and starts becoming something that evolves within a system. And understanding this difference changes how decisions are made, not in terms of chasing higher returns or larger inputs, but in terms of preserving continuity, because in a compounding system, staying in the process is often more important than trying to optimize every individual step. What looks like slow progress is often invisible structural growth building beneath the surface, much like roots growing before the tree becomes visible. And by the time the visible results appear, the foundation has already been built through patience, continuity, and uninterrupted time inside the system. The final lesson is simple. Compound wealth is less about chasing speed and more about protecting time, because time is the one force that transforms small capital into large outcomes. And this is the part most people miss, because wealth rarely looks impressive in the beginning, and the silence of slow progress often convinces people that nothing is happening, when in reality the system is still working beneath the surface, building momentum in ways that are too small to notice day by day. The truth is that compound wealth is less about intelligence and more about endurance, less about chasing perfect opportunities and more about protecting uninterrupted time, because time is the force that allows small, consistent actions to become disproportionately powerful later. And maybe that is the real lesson, that wealth is not built in dramatic moments, but in long periods of patience where the system is allowed to keep running without interference. Because in the end, money grows best when it is given time to do what humans naturally struggle with most: waiting. If this changed the way you think about money, subscribe for more deep breakdowns on wealth psychology, economic systems, and the hidden math shaping financial life.